Well, hello and welcome to our podcast, Never Mind the Chaos. Each week, we're going to visit with some amazing people to have them share with us their stories and their journey. My name is Leonard Simpson, partner with 2020 Financial Advisors, and I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Michael Chastain of Chastain Jones Law. And today we are going to visit with one of those amazing people, John Groalka, founder of Groalka Law in Sacramento, California. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Michael and Leonard. It's nice to see you.
John, I found it fascinating. I was reading a little bit about your some of the jobs you had early on. I guess going back to high school, and one of them made me chuckle. I don't know many people that could both talk about their time working as a dishwasher in a Chinese restaurant, which I did when I was in high school. It was a small neighborhood family Chinese restaurant. I remember it was a very small kitchen, and I had two tubs, one for the dirty dishes and one for the clean dishes. So I did get a chuckle out of that. I thought I also saw something about your work on a family ranch. So I'd really like to hear about your journey starting as a young man, because I believe that certainly your life experience has probably shaped ultimately who you became and the direction you took in life. Fair statement.
Absolutely. I came from a large family. I have five brothers and three sisters. And we grew up at a ranch, and work was always a big part of what we did. It was a working ranch. We did that. My dad was a radiologist. And so my dad worked as long as I can remember. He worked 6 days a week as a radiologist, or actually 5.5 days. He would work half days on Saturdays, and then we would work the ranch on the weekend. So working was a big part of who we were. And yes, I was a dishwasher at a Chinese restaurant, which was a wonderful experience. They had the best teriyaki burger that I've ever had to this day. The chefs there were Chinese, and they joked with the waitresses, and they would not speak English with the waitresses, but they spoke English amongst themselves when there was nobody else in the room. So I have a lot of really good memories from working there.
We'll have to talk offline sometime about our experiences as dishwashers.
Yes, yes.
So, John, so tell us why did you decide to go to law school? What promoted that interest, and a little bit about that part of your journey. So you're on the ranch, and now you're moving to
So
the big city.
I'm on the ranch, and I in high school, I played sports, but I also had a great job that I liked. I worked in a place called Palomart, which was like a larger 7-Eleven kind of grocery liquor store. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. So my brothers and sisters, I was the only one that didn't go to a 4-year college right out of the gate. So I went to a junior college. They'd opened up an extension by the ranch. And at that junior college, there was a class on business law. And it was a fascinating class. And it really got into, the teacher was wonderful. And I'm really sad that I don't remember his name, because I would like to send him a thank you. But his focus really was on solving problems and how you use the law, how you use these issues to solve problems. And it had a big impact on me. And then flash forward, I graduate college with an accounting degree. I take and pass the CPA exam. I'm going in that direction. And then that class kind of percolated back in my mind, and I decided to go to law school. And part of it was, at that point I was both an auditor and a hearing officer, so I was handling appeals. And so I would handle a $300 head of household case for a single mom, and I would be handling unitary tax, multi-state, multinational tax corporations at the appeal level.
And
And as
this
I
was
was
at the
going,
franchise. This was at the Franchise Tax Board, right?
California Franchise Tax Board, which is the California version of the IRS. And it was a wonderful experience. And I learned an awful lot there. And I had cases there where I felt that the people were not very well prepared, the representatives. I felt like I could do a much better job. And so that was part of what percolated. And again, remembering that class that I enjoyed so much way back when. And so that's when I went to law school. I probably had a predisposition to go more into tax litigation at that point because I did enjoy that. I was good at that. But as after I graduated law school, I really focused more. And life is so much about where you land, right? And where I landed, I was working for a person who had a similar background. He had been a CPA with a Big Six or Big Eight at the time CPA firm, and did some tax litigation, but he did a lot of estate planning and a little bit of tax planning. And so I did a lot of estate planning, and I loved it because you're really getting a chance to help people in a lot of different ways. And you just see a lot of different things. One of the first estate plans that I did when I realized that I had led a sheltered life, which I had not known before, was for a very wealthy Asian family, a very, very wealthy Asian family. And inside that trust, we're taking care of the wife, the kids, and the mistress. And it was all right out there. And I just as I was writing this, I was just thinking this is just a different deal. But again, you're just helping that family, solve problems, how they want their family to be in generations to come. And so it's something that I've really enjoyed, and I still love having the opportunity to do that.
It sounds like, John, you've always had a lot of passion for helping.
I think that comes up when you grow up on a ranch, when you live out in the country, the vehicle breaks down, you see a neighbor that needs help, you help them. And so the other thing is, when you grow up in a small town in the country, it's very uncomfortable for me to walk by somebody, especially a second time, and not say hi, right? You're just friendly with people. And so it is a little different world than sometimes you see in the big city. But that is my background.
And that really, really framed you, right?
It did very much.
So
Yeah.
The gravamen of your practice is really helping people essentially do a succession plan. I mean, isn't that really what estate planning and tax navigation is about? Is figuring out how the person can pass on their wealth and work onto their family without losing it or having to pay it all to Uncle Sam.
Absolutely. And the other component to that would be family values. You want your children, if you're not here to guide them, you want to help your children become the people you want them to be, productive members of society. You don't want them to be trust fund babies. And then the same also is true with tax planning. Tax is the greatest impediment to building wealth, on a multi-generational level. And so, especially say you have a family business, it could be a family business that's been around for 3 generations. And then now you get to the point where you have to sell that for whatever reason. And you may lose 40 or 50% of the value of that to taxes. And that can have an extreme impact on that family's ability to retire or where they're going to go. And so making these types of improvements really can provide transformational changes for that family, meaning that their lives will be significantly better, not just for them, but for their children and their children's children. And then also when you have someone who may know they have little time left, when they know that their family is taken care of, that things are going to work the way they want it to work, that they've done the best that they can for their kids, there's a gratitude there from the client and from the kids that you won't see in any other area of practice. And there's also more of a loyalty amongst clients. We have many clients that we've represented for over 25 years, where we're getting into the 3rd and 4th generation now, which is, something I truly love. It's a blessing.
All right, well, that's a testament to the good work that you do. The name of this podcast is Never Mind the Chaos, and one of the things that we talk about is, the challenges that you overcame, and you really kind of glossed over a bunch of those. So, as I understand it, you wound up being a single dad, raising little kids. So, can you tell us a little bit about that part of the journey?
Um, I have had at the time, a 1.5-year-old and a 4.5-year-old. I was married, and the marriage was not working. And so, we split up. And this is a very, very long time ago. Now you hear about 50-50 custody being very common. In the days when I got divorced, 50-50 custody was not common. Men normally did not have custody of children. And especially if you had a 1.5 or an 18-month-old, normally I would, at the time, I would have been lucky to have unsupervised overnight visits. And so, I bargained for that in a sense, in terms of the asset allocations and so forth. And, I was able to get, 50-50 custody, which I took very seriously. I didn't have babysitters. I didn't have family close by. I just had me. And so it was just me and my two kids for many, many years. And it was a wonderful experience. When I was at that time, I was working for a firm, but I felt uncomfortable leaving early because I would, have to pick them up on my days. I'd have to get to there around 3:30 or so, so I would be leaving early. So I would leave early. I would take care of them, have, cook them dinner, and get them to bed. And then I would work in the evening to, kind of cover the things that I may have missed. I would do yard duty, at school, which I really loved. It was amazing to see how your kids behaved when they're in at school amongst their friends. They had totally different behavioral patterns than they did even with their friends at home. So I felt uncomfortable with that. And that's a big part of why I went out on my own. So that way I was able to not have to answer for anyone as to where I was going, what I was doing. And not that I had any pressure from my employers. I think that was all self-imposed. But for me, that's one of the main reasons why I formed the firm.
Sure. So let
John,
me
you've been at this for
go ahead. Go
Pardon?
ahead.
John, you've been at this for 30 years and built a hugely successful practice. And I'm sure that there have been times of immense challenge through the course of your 30 years in this profession and running your practice. Maybe talk somewhat about those challenges and how you adapted along the way.
I've always been pretty blessed because we've always stayed very busy. We've always had clients. We've never really had to advertise. Most of our work really just comes from referrals. Now I write quite a bit, so the writing brings work in as well. So the biggest challenge really is making sure you're getting the work done on a timely basis and being able to find good help. It seemed like that was easier to do in years past, but more recently, it is much more challenging to find good people that have the same work ethic that I did, and I think many of my colleagues did in years past. Although I guess I'm beginning to sound a little bit like my dad now, when you're wondering about finding good people, but I think it is different, and I do think it even became much worse after COVID. I mean, people's expectations where they want to work remotely, and that can work to a certain level, but I think life in the work experience or the client experience is really all about relationships. Or if you're collaborating with something, life is truly about relationships, and you can do some of that remotely, but really not to the same degree. And I think that's being lost on a younger generation, where the thought is we could just do it remotely, but how well do you
Right.
really get to know people? And I'm not saying it can't happen, but even with people that I work with, that I collaborate with, that I do, somewhat remotely via Zoom, I always make a point of making sure you meet them, you get to know them, and because again, life is really about relationships, and you need to build
Right.
trust. You need to understand what people's strengths and weaknesses are. So it is just it's a different world now, I think, in
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
ways.
I mean,
That's a very important observation. Yeah.
I was gonna say there's definitely a difference between looking someone right in the eye, shaking their hand, sitting down and working out the problems as opposed to, over a screen. It's just not the same, at least not in
No,
my.
no, absolutely not.
So, John, what I wanted to ask you was, so you're working for a firm, you're fulfilling their requirements, but you kind of imposed on yourself, well, I'm not feeling good about the fact that I'm leaving early or whatnot. Um, but it can be when you open up your own practice, it can be a bit of jumping out of the pan into the fire, because now you're taking on a whole nother set of things that you may not have had to do in that other firm, right? Hiring people, firing people, setting up systems, intakes, accounting, bookkeeping. Uh, how did that transition go for you, and how did you feel about that?
Well, at the beginning, before I did, there were just sort of two analogies that I had as I was thinking about what I was going to do. There's a country western song where it's about this guy who's swimming. He doesn't know how far he has to go. He knows he has to keep swimming, right? And so that experience is a little bit like that. And then also it was sort of like in my mind is you walk up to a cliff, right? You look down and you see it's a very long fall, but yet you still back up, you run as hard as you can, you jump, and you hope you make it to the other side. I will have to say it was a blessing for me that I had a real steady work. It was scary economically at the first, because you don't know, what's going to happen. But for me it worked very well, but it was scary. And one of the more interesting stories is what happened on the very first day that my practice opened. So what I've done is I've paid rent at office place. I was concerned about people thinking I still had that I'd be respected as a solo. So I paid a little bit more for fancier office space than maybe really I needed. And so I'm going to drive my kids to daycare before I go into to work. And that process, because of where the daycare was located, was a 1.5 hour drive in the morning and a 1.5 hour drive on the pickup. And so
Wow.
I'm on my way in, and Patrick he has no symptoms, no fever, no issues, but he has a spot on his chest. And so they cannot take him at daycare. And so then I'm thinking, oh my. And then I think, well, if I have one kid, what's the difference between two kids, right? So I decide I'm going to jettison the other half of the drive, right? And then I call my secretary, who I don't really know yet, because this is day one, right? And I told her, and I had a new client. I thought how wonderful to start a business with a brand new client. That was a referral from a CPA I'd worked with for many years. And so I told her to call and tell them to reschedule because we have to do that. And she calls back and said they're driving in from Auburn, which is a city a couple of hours away, hour and a half to 2 hours away, and we can't raise them. And so now I'm thinking, oh my God, what do I do? Do I let them drive in 2 hours and not and no show? And so I decided what I was going to do is I was going to take my kids to the office. I had to make sure my secretary had chicken pox. I think that's what Patrick had was chicken pox, right? Which is a communicable disease, right? So, and this is all under attorney client privilege. This is not going to be shared with anyone here, right? So in any event, she's had that, and so I get into the office. I park in this fancy office building. You had to park in the ground floor garage, right? And then you get into an elevator to get to the lobby. Then you get out and go into another elevator to go into the main building. I would never do something like that now. But in any event, so we do that. And my daughter has never been shy and never been afraid, runs a little bit ahead. There's a whole bunch of people with white coats in the elevator. And she looks around and she has an audience. And so she says, hi, my name's Elizabeth. That's my brother, Patrick. He can't go to school today because he's got chicken pox. The people in the white coats, they were having a doctor's meeting from Sutter Health. One of Sutter Health's corporate offices was in my building. And so my first thought is, oh my God, they're gonna have me thrown out of the building or something for sharing this communicable disease. And I'm trying to think of something funny to say to kind of diffuse the situation, but the only things I could think of to say would not be true. And so I just stood there with this really, sheepish, guilty look on my face, and there was not a smile. There was no compassion in those looks at all. So anyway, we get out of the office, get out of the elevator, get into the office. The clients come, we have the little note on the door saying, "Have you had chickenpox?" Which is a great way to meet a new client, right? You have to acknowledge you don't have that you've already had chickenpox as a child, right? And so then they come in, and I thought my secretary would be able to keep track of them for just give me 20 minutes. I can get them in, get them out, and we can be on our way. My kids would not stop knocking on the door. So then they said, we started out with a mobile home park. We always had our kids in the office, just bring them in. So then they came in. I'm going through this sophisticated estate tax analysis, because we're setting up a family limited partnership for the mobile home park and some other things. Well, my daughter is drawing pictures and poking the client's dad to show him the pictures, and my son is climbing up my chair, flopping into the seat at that first meeting. And so anyway, that meeting went really well. But of course, chickenpox wasn't the one-day deal. So I opened my office. I'm paying rent, I'm paying salary, but I couldn't actually go to work for, I can't remember if it was a week or what it was. So I was just sitting there twiddling my thumbs, seeing all the money fly out the window. But that was day one on my firm. But it all worked out.
For when COVID hit, right? I mean,
Pardon me?
I said good preparation for when COVID hit.
COVID was a whole different deal. COVID, I had a firm, and so it turned out I would be the only one in the office, and I didn't even know how to use the postage machine, right? And so with COVID, the simplest things became the most complicated. So but COVID, that actually I'd written some articles on how to complete. One of the problems with estate planning is you need to have everything notarized. And so how do you complete an estate plan? And you have people worried about dying with COVID. So how do you complete an estate plan if you can't get it notarized? And so I put together an alternative for that in an article, and that was one of the first articles that I had that was published nationally in newspapers and whatnot, because I used a different declaration to say we would have had a notary, but we're confined under federal law and blah 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 blah. So in any event, COVID was a big challenge for me, but we responded to it well.
So John, I wanted
you were able to adapt. Yeah.
Yes.
When you opened your firm, did you take clients with you? So you actually had work to do on day one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So
I didn't know who would come, and then I was a little different at first, and I really liked the people I used to work with. And to be perfectly honest with you, it was sort of a situation where a cup is half full or a cup is half empty, to how you depend on how you look at it, right? And some of the things they were describing made it sound like the cup was half empty, but now being an employer, the cup was half full. And if I knew what I did now, I might have stayed with them. They were very, very good to me. So when I did leave, I've always had clients that were coming directly to me. So I took only the clients that came. I only sent a notice to the clients that came directly to me. I worked on a lot of their very large clients, but I did not want them to be embarrassed by somebody getting a notice from somebody leaving the firm. So I didn't do anything to interrupt their other client relationships. But the clients that came just specifically to see me that didn't know them, those were the clients that I took.
Yeah, when I opened my firm, I had the good fortune of I was able to bring 40 clients with me and trust money. It made that transition a whole lot easier, because it is nerve-wracking. When is that first client going to come in? The new client to the new firm. And I didn't have anybody show up day one, chickenpox or no. So
So it was a good experience, but you never know who's going to come. And I remember somebody asked me once, "Where do you get your work from?" And I stopped and I thought about it. I said, "Well, I really don't know." Right? Because people just come from referrals or what have you, because I've never really advertised or done anything, like that so much. So there is always a little bit of a fear that things won't continue.
John,
Interesting.
anything you would have done differently?
I might have stayed at the, I might not have gone out on my own. I'd have to flip side because I say they were good to me, and I might have stayed at that firm, but if I had stayed at that firm, I don't think I would have developed it the way I did. And I think partly because you're on your own gave me a greater need to write and publish and so forth. And
Mhm.
I've gotten into a lot more really high net worth matters that I probably would not have. So the only thing I would have thought about maybe is not leaving that firm where they were good to me. I just felt uncomfortable with leaving early and all of that. But honestly, no, I don't think so. I mean, I would travel a little bit more with the kids, maybe taking a little bit more time off a little bit earlier along the way. They grow, everybody tells you this, but you don't realize it. They grow up so darn fast. And one of the things I did mention to you is when you're a single dad, as I am, and with little kids, it forces you to compartmentalize your life. So that way, you have to take care of your kids. And I made sure I took vacations so we had time with them. And so no, I don't think I really would have done much of anything differently as I think back on it.
So
It
John,
sounds like
like to
publishing
go
is
ahead,
a
Bob.
big part of what you do.
Pardon me?
Publishing is something that is uh, sounds like it's a passion of yours, right? You enjoy that
I do
aspect of your
enjoy writing.
practice. Yeah,
I do enjoy writing.
yeah.
So John, I'd like to switch just a little bit. I mean, we've talked about you know your practice kind of fundamentally is about succession plans for families and how to pass on not only their wealth but values and family goals. I'd like to kind of niche it down for the lawyers that are going to be listening to this. As we talked off air, California has no requirement for succession plan. Um, Here in New Mexico, where I am, it's actually an ethical requirement that you have a written succession plan. And my experience has been because I've had a few friends that are unfortunately had small firms and literally died, you know, in the middle of the night, went to bed, didn't wake up, and it became such a nightmare for their families to deal with with their practice and take care of their clients. So I guess what I that's a long-winded way of saying what is your suggestion for lawyers now um, about how to plan for the unexpected and if something happens to them that makes them unable to practice, what are you suggesting that they should be doing now to take care of their clients?
Well, I think no matter where you practice, how large the city is or how large the state is, being a lawyer is a small community. And then even within the legal community, you have people that do estate planning, you have people do criminal law. So what you want to do is identify a person or persons that you trust, that you feel comfortable with, that practice in a way similar to you. Doesn't mean they do everything exactly the same as you, but you want to find somebody that you can identify that can step in. And doing that actually helps you even now because a lot of the work I do is I collaborate with other people. And, all of us, we don't know what we don't know. And so that there are other people that may be experts. So, but I think the first step is you're going to want to make sure you're identifying somebody that you can refer your clients to, and they will either do the work, or they will help refer them out to people who will be able to do the work. There is an advantage to that client, to the person receiving that, because that's, an additional, workflow or client base for them. And so that would be number one. And then all of us, you may want to be hiring. I think we all have an idea that, the firm will continue in some fashion. And so, trying to hire and train and teach, a successor that will be able to step in and take over. And in a sense, that's your successor plan, your retirement plan. And, either you're selling your practice, or you have somebody that's able to take it over. Having somebody to take it over, then you know that you have somebody that would look at things, most likely in the same way that you did, and will have the same values and priorities, and making sure that the clients are taken care of. But that is absolutely something that's very important, and it should be something considered from day one.
Yeah, the other thing that I think is really important is that you set up your practice in a way that somebody could actually take it over if they had to. So, having bookkeepers who keep your profit and loss statement correct, that your trust fund, I mean, the bar requires this, right? But it's shocking how many people actually trust funds are just a mess. And having notes on the file so that somebody can really take over and take care of your client, right? Because at
Right,
the end of the day, um, you know, I think the basic rule needs to be your client needs to be taken care of. And
right.
Right.
um, uh, you know, when I work with
Well,
other firms, and I do work, on the business side primarily with them, I'm always surprised at that somebody couldn't just walk in and take over. I mean, that was when we sold our firm. Part of the reason why it was able to sell is it literally was turnkey. They just had to show up and everything was in place. All they had to do was follow the system. So,
So, and there is there is firm management software which we use. We have well over 4,000 clients, and as you know, each client may have 5 or 6 or 7 matters. So it's really beyond, somebody that can just sit down and open up a file cabinet. It's and then the work that I do, I may have done a trust for Leonard 20 years ago. And so, I need to be able to respond to that, or look at that, or see what's going on
mhm.
with respect to that. So, client management software is really critical, and that's something that we utilize, and it can make your day-to-day life so much better for sure.
what software do you use?
We were using something called Clio. We use something called Wealth Council, which is a drafting software, and Wealth Council has a management system called Leap, and so we're using Leap.
Okay, and you're happy with
Interesting.
Yes. I am happy with that. It seems like it's always evolving. We were using something called Clio before, and it wasn't able to give us the information that we needed. So we're still a little new on Leap. And so the jury is still out a little bit as to how that works, but so far it's doing much better than what we had before.
And is that software, Leap, is that geared towards estate planning? Is it kind of specifically designed for that, or is it?
I believe so.
um,
Because it's tied to Wealth Council. Wealth Council is specifically focused on estate planning. So, but it does provide an opportunity to track the information, track what's going on, provide comments, last documents. It has billing software. It's pretty thorough. So fingers crossed.
Okay. Yeah,
Well, it
we
sounds
use
like you have to have,
yeah, we use
go
my
ahead.
case, which is we've been very happy with, but ours is, because we're a criminal firm, we don't have 4,000 clients, fortunately. We would be completely overwhelmed. But yeah,
But see, I'm not working with everyone every day, but that makes the record keeping all the more important, because if somebody hasn't seen me for 5 or 10 or 15 years, they still assume that I'm not that they're top of. I shouldn't say assume, that they want to believe that they're top of mind, right? And so we need to be able to quickly access that information before I meet them, so I can speak with them in an intelligent way.
absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm a big proponent of having good um software that you actually use. I mean, I one of the things that I find with firms that I work with is that they have the right software, but they don't use it. They don't take advantage of it. You know, um, they don't take good notes and whatever, and or they're not tracking their time properly, or I mean, it's still data in, data out, right? Uh,
Correct.
no matter how good your software is, if your data in's no good, you're out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there is definitely a certain amount of discipline that's required to use that properly for sure.
Well, I guess the takeaway is it's imperative that the structure and the systems in place
Correct.
to provide the continuity.
Correct. And then that applies down even to the work assignments that we do. Everything we do, there's a process. There's a process that we use for a foundational estate planning client. There's a process that we use for trust administration. There's a process that we use for a high net worth client, and there's a process that we use, someone selling an appreciated business. There's a certain process that we go through, so that way we're making sure we're doing the appropriate analysis and getting the best possible result. And so, the problems really only come up when you try and shortcut that process. So you need to make sure, to make sure you have the discipline to cover each of the steps along the way.
So
Absolutely.
John, for the newer attorneys that will be listening to this podcast, any words of wisdom that you'd like to impart?
There's no shortcut to experience, and law school was really based on the Socratic method. And that Socratic method means somebody is giving you kernels of wisdom, and you need to work to develop those. And you need to do that so that way you fully understand that. And as Michael and I were talking, in years past, when we did not have the benefits of word processing, when we actually had something called whiteout, which you might see in a museum somewhere, things were different and you had to work your way through things. I think now people are used to doing things pushing a button, and people are used to doing things, without really thinking all the way through. And you need to understand, if there's a code section that says you do this, you need to understand why it does that. What's the purpose for it? What are the requirements for it? You need to understand, are there exceptions to it? Other ways of looking at that? And then oftentimes, you can get a completely different answer just by framing the proper problem differently. So making sure that you're focusing on really what the client's goals and objectives are, and not getting lost in the weeds. I was very blessed. I went to McGeorge Law School, and my constitutional law professor was a guy by the name of Anthony Kennedy, who was on the Supreme Court. And even before, anybody was talking about him going there, people just like to sit in his class, people meaning non-law students. And he was notorious for asking a question, and he would ask a question and he'd keep twisting the facts, right? And he would work his way around the room, and then he would oftentimes go to somebody who was not a law student and ask him. And I think oftentimes what he was showing you is that sometimes we can get so focused on the law, so focused on all of these highbrow issues, you lose your common sense. And oftentimes, that common sense answer was the best answer. But for a new lawyer, being able to work your way through things, not looking for a quick answer, even if you have a quick answer, making sure you understand the whys for that and what the next step is. And one of the greatest blessings for lawyers, especially here in California, is there is just an overwhelming amount of materials from the continuing education of the bar. So taking the time to read through these things. And as a new lawyer, you want to really focus on your foundation. It's like a tree. You want to have a tree that has really strong roots. And so you want to take your time now to learn all of the basics, to learn the whys and the whys nots, because what will happen as time goes by is you'll be focused on, from a business standpoint, oftentimes you only have so much time to solve a problem. And so you really want to focus on building that foundation at the very, very beginning. And that will pay off dividends for you in the years to come.
So, John, what are your plans over the next few years? Do you plan on continuing to practice, or do you have an exit strategy for yourself?
I do have an exit strategy, but I'm not ready to implement that. I truly love what I do, and I'm just doing too much of it. And so I've also been blessed. I think I shared with you that I was a single dad. I stayed a single dad for about 28 years. 29 years, maybe a little bit longer. And I recently got married. I had my 1 year anniversary, December 10. And the best way I can describe the difference now is when I go home from work, I go home to a home and not a house. So I'm very, very, very happy, but I'm also recognizing that I'm working too much. And my wife reminds me of that. So I don't work weekends like I did quite so much. I am looking to focus on the more advanced parts of my planning. When I'm working on a sale of a $30 million building or a $100 million estate, I could do that from anywhere. And so I would like to be able to travel more. I would like to be able to, not work as frequently. And I would like to be able to find people that can help with the more foundational areas of my practice. And I would like to teach them how to do that. I think we have a very unique perspective on that, and that's why we've been so successful. So my goal is maybe, 5, 7, maybe 10 years. But I want to focus more and more on the advanced planning, and not just because of the numbers. I mostly just want to help people. And I think all of us really want to work with people that we can help. We want to make a difference in their lives, and we want them to appreciate us, right? And so that's really what I'm looking to do, is to do more of that, and travel a little bit more, and wind down a little bit as opposed to just stopping.
Well, I will tell you, I highly recommend getting out of the day-to-day practice. I still have my fingers in, I'm still of counsel to our firm, but I don't do the day-to-day stuff anymore. And there's something very nice about that. So, but
that would be a dream for me. As I say, I signed up to be a lawyer. I didn't really sign up to be an employer and a business manager and some of those other aspects of it. But truth be told, I do love what I do, and I do feel like I'm making people's lives better. I do feel like there are times when I make transformational changes for people where we're able to provide success for them that they couldn't even imagine could be done. And when you see somebody's face, we had a client some years back where she was working with a national stock trading company, financial advising company, a national level. And her dad had left his retirement accounts to her. And but in doing so, she was to take care of her sisters, her siblings. And she's working with this national company, and they tell her, just move your account from here to here, and then we'll be better able to advise her. And so she did that, and everything was okay until she got a bill from the IRS. And what happened was they told her to move it out of a retirement account, out of a restricted account, into just a regular account. And this was an inherited IRA. This was not a spousal IRA. And by the time she knows about it, the check has been cashed. All this is so, under the law, there really is no way to just simply fix that. And so she reached out to me. She had reached out to a bunch of other firms, and they just said, no, you can't fix that. And technically, that is the quick answer. And so I looked at it, I chatted with her, and I agreed to help her. And it took about 2 years. When I first assessed the case, I thought my biggest challenge would be with the IRS and the Franchise Tax Board. They were very willing to work with me, no problem whatsoever. Not meaning that they were just going to forgive it. They allowed me to work with trying to solve the problem with this national company. And so then I sued them, and I don't do a lot of litigation now. I sued them for elder abuse, sued them for a variety of other things. And then these large companies, they have mandatory arbitration provisions, which required a $7,000 initial payment just to get into the arbitration. So I said that was elder abuse too. And so it percolated along. She couldn't afford to pay me really after about the first month. And it took almost 2 years. But when we got to the very end, we finally got to, we went through a number of in-house counsel, and they were no help at all. We finally had outside counsel, and then we were able to resolve it. And what they actually did, and this was an eye-opening experience for me, is we get to the very end, they agreed to put everything back and treat it as if the only thing that came out of the account were the required minimum distributions. So all of that was done. So all of the taxes, were forgiven. All of it was done. We get on the phone, and so we have, I have the counsel for the other side. Then there's me, and then there's the person who I would call the wizard who's pulling the levers. And they just say, they're just going to do whatever is told. They say, what do you want the effective date to be? And so, in other words, they were just going to pretend that it never ever happened at all. And I'm just thinking, wow, I cannot believe this. I did not want that because I'd already told the IRS what was going on. That had happened, so I wanted the effective date to be that date. And so it went through, and she was crying when we were done. We actually have a testimonial video on it. Largely because she didn't know what to do with her family, and she felt like she'd let her father down. And that was one of the happiest days I ever had, because that was sort of an impossible thing to do. And we were able to make it happen. And it really reinforced in my mind that really very few things are impossible. It's just a matter of how you look at it and how you went through that. And one of the things that I hit them on was that their forms that they used were misleading. I couldn't get them because nothing was in writing when they told them that not to worry about and gave them the advice, but their forms were misleading. So that way she couldn't tell filling out the form that it would be triggering the tax. And that's actually the small little bit that was we able to force the result. But where that guy got on and just said he had the ability to make it as if it had never happened before, just resonated with me. And so you just never know what can be done. And so you always want to make sure that there's maybe a different way of framing the problem, rather than just looking at the tax issue. Did they do all of the things that they were supposed to do when they had her sign off on that?
Right. So, John, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you because they need your services, what's the best way for them to do that?
Probably the best thing would be just to call the office. Our number is 916-440-8036.
Very good.
John, thanks so much for sharing that amazing story.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, congratulations on that, and congratulations on your new nuptials.
Oh, thank you. I'm very, very happy. I'm very blessed.
Good, good.
And had I not gone through all the things I had gone through before, I never would have met her. So there you go.
There you go. All right. Well, I think that's that we should wrap it up. Thank you very much, John, for your time and wisdom. And Leonard, always nice to work with you.
Thanks so much. And yes, John, thank you for sharing your story.
And this is entirely confidential, correct?
Except for, the 10,000.
Except for the recording. Yes, I'm so.
Right. All right.
Sunrise and the early bird rock me to my senses. It's a chilly wind this morning, not a cloud in the sky. Today I walk the ancient trails among the petrol